Hi there. I'm Cindy Linden, and this is the Cook Along podcast. I am going to do something a little crazy today. I've never done this before, and I may regret it partway through, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try to cook an entire meal with you, and here's the caveat to that. I am going to separate it into different podcasts. So in order for you to make the entire meal with me, you're going to have to look for the separate pieces and listen to those individually, because I don't want to overwhelm you with a podcast that's way too long. So here is what the meal is going to consist of. We're going to do an oven-roasted chicken shawarma, recipe from the New York Times. We're going to do a naan, that's N-A-A-N, that's a kind of flatbread that I think comes from America's Test Kitchen, although it came out of a magazine and I took a photo of it. Remember the days when you had to sneak out of the doctor's office with the page you torn out of the magazine? You don't have to do that anymore, so I have a photo of it here. And I picked this one in particular because most of the recipes that I have, or even when I went searching online, they all use yeast and they have rising times, and I didn't want to mess with any of that. So I'm going to use this one, which does not have a rising time. It has a sort of short resting time, but it doesn't use yeast. So that's the main dish and the bread. I'm going to make a smashed cucumber salad to go with it. That is just extraordinary, really nice, and has only like four ingredients, and they're super simple. And then, if I have time and still any energy left, I'm also going to make some hummus. Those will all be found on your podcast feed or on the cookalongpodcast.com website. When I have finished them all, you'll find this same introduction at the beginning of all of those recipes. This is the naan part of this evening's meal adventure. I've started the chicken to marinade. I've made the hummus, and now I'm going to get the naan dough ready to go. This is pretty simple. It's just a matter of combining some stuff, and then I'm going to set it to rest, which it needs to do for at least 30 minutes. And then we will whip them out. But it does require a little special equipment. Because of the way we're making these today, we're going to use an outdoor grill. So they're going to get nice and charred on the outside. We're not going to try to do them inside in the oven. Like I said, most of the naan recipes that I went to research today, just because I wanted to see if there was something better than what I already had, they all use yeast and rising time. They also bake in the oven. And I am just doing this differently. This is a recipe I haven't tried. I'm excited to do it. And I'm hoping that you will join me, but you do need to have some kind of a grill outside. I'm using a gas grill because while I have both kinds, I can more easily tell the temperature of the gas grill than of the charcoal grill. I'm talking about the equipment, so I'll give you the rest of the equipment. Besides the grill, you want a large bowl. And we're going to mix things together with a wooden spoon or your hands. I'll probably use my hands. I just think it's quicker and easier. And this is sort of equipment, I guess, because you need to oil the grates really well of the grill. You want to put a lot of vegetable oil on them. So that becomes a tool, or an equipment piece, is both the oil and the means to oil the grates, which you can do with a brush, or you can do with a really well-soaked paper towel that's got a lot of olive oil in it. The ingredient list, and this will make 4 pieces of naan, and they're not small, they're 12 inches a piece. So 2 1/3 cups all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1/4 cup of plain yogurt, and that can be plain regular yogurt or plain Greek yogurt. I have Greek in my house right now. And 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. As a do-ahead, you need to melt those 2 tablespoons of butter in your microwave or on the stove or whatever. And keep in mind that the whole thing that we're doing here is kind of part of the do-ahead for making the naan, because it has to sit for at least 30 minutes. Now what's going to happen here is that the baking soda, the baking powder, it makes a self-rising flour when you combine it with the excited acids of the yogurt. And that will make it a little puffy instead of using the yeast to do that. So all we're going to do, get our large bowl, and we're going to put the flour in there. And this time, if you want to just scoop it, I'm going to say don't worry about it. I have a spoon that lives in my flour, so I'm just going to go ahead and spoon it. But I'm not being really picky about aerating it first this time, because bread isn't exactly the same thing as a cake or cookies or something where you want them fairly light. So I'm spooning it in there, I'm leveling it off, and then I'm going to do 2 1/3 cups. There was 1 cup, here's the second cup, and 1/3 of a cup. I'm using a little old-fashioned metal cup with a sort of painted metal handle. It's very quaint, but you can't see through it, so it's a little hard to tell where the marks are. In that goes. Add to that the baking powder, which, as I said, is a tablespoon. And then teaspoon of baking soda and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. And you want to use kosher salt, or else don't use this much salt. If you're using sea salt or table salt, cut this back by about 1/2. And then a tablespoon of sugar. Now we're just going to sort of whisk that together. You can use a fork, you can use a whisk, you can use a spoon, doesn't matter. I'm going to melt the butter here. And I am using a plain Greek yogurt. And I don't want to put that in yet until my butter's ready, because this all kind of goes in at the same time, and I don't want the baking soda and stuff to start reacting with this yogurt before I'm ready to mix things up. All right, there we go. Melted butter goes in to the flour mixture, as does the yogurt. The Greek yogurt is a little more sour than regular plain yogurt. I don't know if the acid is higher, but I wouldn't be surprised. And it's got more protein in it. So if there's any way to make the bread more healthy, I guess this would be the tiny thing you could do, is use Greek yogurt to get that protein in there. And I'm going to just do this with my hands now. It's going to be messy, but that's okay. So I'm moving the flour on top of the yogurt so that it isn't just yogurt on my fingers. And the butter and the flour, we're going to make it into little bits. And what we're doing is we're stirring it until it's combined into sort of a dough. We want the dough to kind of come together. If it's too dry, be prepared to add a little extra water. I would be surprised if we don't need to, based on how this dough is feeling to me. I don't think there's going to be nearly enough liquid in here. So first it'll come like when you're doing biscuits. You get little shards and bits and pieces of dry stuff. But as you squeeze it, it starts to come together a little bit. Yeah, or not. There's no way, okay? So it's stuck all over my hands in little strips, but it is not coming together. So I'm going to use the bowl that I had the melted butter in and just add a little water to that. And just put in a little at a time. This is maybe a tablespoon. Let's see how that does. I think that was not enough. I'm going to get some more water ready to go. A little more. So now I've got about 2 tablespoons in there. The recipe here, they mentioned the fact that it may take up to 1/2 cup of water. And that's part of the reason I'm not surprised that it is so dry, because clearly they already know that that's an issue. I think I'm going to add probably, a 1/4 tablespoon here. Let's see how that goes. Yeah, it's starting to come together. I think it still isn't enough. So the 4 tablespoons I put in are the equivalent of 1/4 cup. And it's really trying, but it's not going to be bread. So back to the sink for more water. Still, we're adding only about 1 tablespoon at a time because we don't want it to get too wet. Then we would really have messed up our chemistry and would have to figure out how to get more dry ingredients in there, and that would be tricky. As it starts to come together, we kind of can start to knead it a little bit. You know, it's still in bits and pieces here, but you can start pushing it into a mass because it's definitely thinking about coming into a whole piece. I think I just need a tiny, tiny, tiny splash, like another teaspoon of water. Ooh, that might have been too much. I hope not. Well, that's going to be it. Just keep smashing it in your bowl. It's going to be really shaggy and lumpy at first, and we want to get it smoother. It's going to take probably a couple of minutes of just pushing on it, moving it around, kneading it until it smooths out. And we'll know it's ready when, if we press it, it bounces back. Right now, if you press it, you'll probably find that your fingerprint remains there just the way you put it in. And that means it's not ready yet. It definitely has got enough water in it now, because it feels kind of tacky, but it's not in any way stretchy or smooth. So I'm picking it up and actually squeezing it between my hands. This is really lumpy, so just keep playing with it. Turn it inside out, squeeze it, press it, do whatever you need to. It needs to smooth out. And if you want to check it, oh, it's starting to bounce back even though it's not smooth yet. You can always stop and check it by pushing your finger into it and seeing what happens. When I say it bounces back, and you may be thinking, what does that mean and how am I going to know it? You will absolutely know it, because you'll see it happen right in front of you. It will just sort of fill itself back in where you pushed on it. I used to make a lot of bread. I used to make a lot of yeast bread. It was sort of my thing. When I was raising kids, I really just enjoyed the process, and I guess even more than the process, the reward of having fresh bread come out of the oven. I started to say on the table, but it didn't always make it to the table, because fresh bread, when it's really warm, sometimes I made French bread and, fancy breads, but often I just did Betty Crocker's white sandwich bread. And oh my gosh, when that stuff comes out of the oven, holy smoke. You cut off the heel and you put butter on it while it's still hot. Oh, it's like nothing like it. But I kind of got over that. Firstly, I shouldn't be eating as much bread as I was putting away. And secondly, it takes a long time. And even now, I find that I look at recipes. I really want to make bread. But I look at the recipes and they say, now set it aside to rise for 2 hours till it's doubled in size. And then you read a little further down and it says, so after you've shaped your loaf, cover it and set it aside to rise for another hour. And all I can think about is that that's my whole day. And it has to be timed out so that I can be there to do those things. So I just push my finger in here. Some of it comes back. I think it's not smooth enough. I'm just going to keep going. Shouldn't be taking this long, but there you go. It is what it is. Anyhow, I stopped baking fresh bread a long time ago. I still do quick breads. That's not the same thing. And I do pizza crust and stuff like that, biscuits, scones, but none of those things have yeast in them, at least not the way I make them. My pizza dough is made very much this way, with the yogurt and the self-rising flour, which are the only two ingredients, because that takes care of the salt and everything. There's no other liquids, and it's just really simple. All right, now I see. When I take the heel of my hand off of here, it definitely bounces back. Yep, and so does my fingerprint. Okay. While it isn't exactly smooth, I think it'll be okay, because it's doing what it's supposed to do. And we're going to divide it in 4 pieces. So put your hand, kind of stretch your forefinger and your thumb around what you think is the middle and just squeeze. And then you can kind of twist it into 2 parts as you just eyeball that. Now you have 2 pieces, and you can kind of lengthen them a little bit, but you don't need to. Do the same thing. Make your forefinger and thumb, squeeze those together and twist a little bit. And you'll get 2 balls out of one side, and do the same thing with the last piece. And now you have 4 balls of dough. And we're just going to roll them in our hands a little bit together to smooth them out, make them a nice round little ball. And set them down here in this bowl. So I'm rounding them out. That's what I'm doing here. Focusing on trying to some of the techniques that I've seen bread makers do, where you roll your hands together at the bottom. It's not important. It's not important. I just watch these videos and I go, oh, wow, I should do that. So now I have 4 balls of dough. They're not exactly the same size, but they're darn close. They are going in this bowl. You're going to cover the bowl and let it just sit at room temperature to kind of get used to itself. All those ingredients need to get to know each other a little bit. So we're going to cover it and let it sit. And it's going to sit there for about 30 minutes and longer if you want to. The naan here can be made ahead of time. It won't be hot, but that is not a critical thing. What you really just need is something to put your shawarma and your hummus and stuff on. So that's that do ahead, which is the making of the naan dough. You can come back to me when we're ready to cook them, a little before you eat. They don't cook very long, but they have to be rolled out. And we have to deal with the oil on the grates. And so come back when you're ready to do all of that, and we'll whip these out onto the grill and come in with some beautifully charred flatbreads. If you are making the full dinner with the oven-roasted chicken shawarma and all of that, this is the point where you would want to move to the next step with your bread. If you're just making the bread by itself, the naan, that's cool too. We're going to go ahead and go to the next step. You want to put a little bit of flour, shouldn't take a lot, hopefully, on your cutting board where you're going to roll the bread out. I don't think I told you this, but this will be easiest with a rolling pin. I think you can do it by hand. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you that. You might need a rolling pin earlier, but hopefully you'll be able to just do it by hand. Get one of your little dough balls and pat it a little bit flat. Set it in the flour that you've spread around. And what we're going to do now is either press it or roll it out until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now that is not very thick. And once it's that thin, I can give you a better idea how big these are going to be. They will rise a little bit when we get them on the grill. Oh, you know what? That reminds me. Let's go start the grill. How about that? I have to go out to the backyard here. Walk with me. We're going out to the back. And I have already oiled the grates. I did that earlier. And you want to be sure, if you haven't done that yet, that you do it, because otherwise these are going to stick. And now, turning the gas on here and get a little flame going. And what we want to do is have this grill heat up to like a medium heat. I have a temperature gauge on the top of this, and this will heat up really hot. It quickly goes to like 700 degrees, and I think we really only needed it about 350, maybe 400 tops. All right, so that's started. It's going to heat up. Close the lid. And now back to the kitchen. Back to the rolling. So roll this thing out in a circle, or as close as you can get to a circle. Turn it over if you need to so that it doesn't stick to the rolling pin. And we're just going to sort of flatten it out. Well, mine's not going to be round. It's clearly going to be oval. Well, I guess it's getting better. So 1/8 of an inch is about, I'll bet you it's about the depth of a quarter. So let's just pretend we got a quarter, and that's how thin we're rolling it. This is only, wow, this is not very big. I thought it was going to roll out bigger than this, but they're maybe not all the same size. So this is about 7 to 8 inches in diameter is all. And that's my first one. I think I'd rather have it too thin than too thick. And that needs to go on a plate because it has to get carried out to the grill. Okay, they're not going to be any reasonable shape at all. They're just going to be funky. And I guess I just have to live with that. I guess it doesn't really matter as long as it tastes good, right? And my second piece of dough, I'm sort of rolling it in the flour on the table here, on the cutting board, so that both sides have a little flour on them. And I'm rolling this one out. This one kind of wanted to stay around for a minute, and now it isn't anymore. I suspect if you used a yeast dough, that it would be a little softer than this. And it might also roll out further, because seeing as how there's not that much in here to make it rise, it's just more of a flatbread than some naan might be. All right, now we're going to add that to the pile over here. I don't know if it's a pile, if there's only two. Move some more of this flour around, get ball number 3 out, and roll that on here. And then roll it out with the rolling pin. Oh, we're having some fun now, huh? The dough is quite stiff. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't let it sit for 30 minutes. It's probably sat for, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours because I wanted to do the podcast and I wanted to get it going for you. But then I had to do all the other pieces of this meal. So they've been sitting here at room temperature for a long time, which might mean it's a little harder to roll out than it would have been if I'd done it when it wasn't quite as used to being in a ball. So there's number 3. And here comes the last one. And if you're making the chicken, you should be able to start to smell it now. Boy, it's only been in there a few minutes, but it smells amazing. But we're talking about naan. I think that this is a great thing to know how to do at home because it's fast. I mean, you know, the fact that it has taken me 3 or 4 hours is my own fault. But you can easily do this in, 5 minutes to mix it together, 10 minutes to knead it. All right, I did forget about the kneading. And then 30 minutes to sit. So what is that? That's 45 minutes, and then you roll it out and you throw it on the grill. That's still not terrible for fresh bread, honestly. Okay, and there is the 4th one. We're going to carry that out and see if the grill is ready for us. These are going to be very quick. It's a little early for me to do these yet because my chicken's not going to be ready for a while. But I want to get it going. This is my tongs. I can't pick them up without doing that. I don't know anybody who can. The grill here looks like it's gotten to about 300. But it's not really medium. I'm going to give it another minute or so. Be sure all the burners are lit. Are they? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. I bet you I'm running out of gas. That's what it is. I bet my propane's about to run out. Otherwise, I think it would be hotter than this. I'd rather it didn't run out right this minute, but I think it is. I am pretty sure it's about to run out. Dang it. Well, I do have another one. I just don't want to have to stop my podcast here to switch it out, but I kind of think I'm not going to have a choice because it seems to not be getting hotter. It seems to be getting cooler. All right, I'm going to go away and leave this be for about 5 minutes, and then I will come back and we'll see if we can cook or if we have to change the propane out. Well, just so you know, I gave up on the old tank. It isn't quite empty, but it sat for the longest time, and the hottest it ever got was 325, and it's supposed to be medium high for this. So I've just swapped it out, and now I'm watching the temperature go creeping up, and I think we probably want it between 400 and 500, because we're going to cook these things pretty fast. They're going to puff up and scorch a little bit, I hope. Or, this may be one of those moments of the best laid plans going awry, because I'm starting to think it's a blockage in a pipe or a tube or whatever you call it somewhere, that it's really not about the tank being full at all. It's about the fact that the propane is not getting where it needs to go. I don't want to have to do this inside. It won't be the same. Well, I'm going to give this a few minutes and we'll see if it heats up. All right, I despair. I do not want to cook these inside. This is not hot enough. I'm going to cook them anyway, and it just may mean they have to cook longer. If you got your grill to like 400, 425 degrees, These are only going to cook about 30 seconds to 1 minute per side. So just get them on your grill and then watch them really carefully because they should scorch a little bit, but you don't want them to completely burn. You know what I'm saying? It's so disappointing. Seriously. It's like there's no heat coming up off of these things. And I don't know how to make it any hotter because they're surely turned up all the way. Grill maintenance, I guess that's the next thing. This makes me very sad. I was so excited about this. I don't know what 30 seconds to a minute aside turns into when you've got the temperature only half of what you need it to be. All right, just close the lid and leave it be a minute, Cindy. All right, so at 275, 250, they have puffed up a little bit, but they're starting to get, oh, you know what? They might be okay. They're just certainly not what they're supposed to be because they should be, a little scorched, like I said, but they're puffing up. I'll take a picture and I'll put them back in here. And you know what? If worst comes to worst, I got some flour tortillas in the house that we can use. If you look at the pictures, they're going to be paler than what they ought to be. But at least I got something. Meanwhile, my chicken shawarma is about to come out of the oven. And I'm going to have to go deal with that. So I'd like to have this finished by then. All right, 240. Oh, golly, we're down to 225 now. See, I opened the lid. Oh, golly. All right, so what I did was I put all the heat onto one side, all the flames onto one side in the hope of getting some of these to heat up enough to cook. Well, okay, I'm going to give that another minute, and this one another minute. Yeah, they're not going to be the right consistency, but that's okay. It's okay. It's going to be fine, right? So I think I'm going to turn this thing off and go in and deal with my chicken. Meanwhile, if this is all you're having, and you're having it maybe with the hummus dip that was part of this full dinner podcast as well, I hope that you like it. And, I don't know what to do. And if you're having it just as bread with butter, that's cool too. And I am going to say goodbye now and wish you happier cooking than what I have had here in these last few minutes. If you're following the other parts of this podcast, remember to check into the cucumber and dill salad, the hummus, and the oven-baked chicken shawarma. Happy cooking!